For Montana East Regional News, this is Emilie Boyles. For Montana East, the Walter Larson trial ended late Monday night after the jury deliberated for 4.5 hours and returned with a guilty verdict in the murder trial associated with the April 2008 death of Susan Marie Casey. The family both cheered and cried as Larson was pronounced guilty on both count 1, deliberate homicide, and count 2, tampering with evidence. It was the largest win thus far for freshman Dawson County Attorney Olivia Rieger, and the first of what promises to be many appearances of State Prosecutor Brant Light as the shift in population continues to the eastern part of the state, and with it, serious new crime. Light and Rieger spoke to the successful completion of the case.
Well, these are always difficult cases. It takes a team is what it takes. It takes working with law enforcement. It takes the two prosecutors working together. It takes a good staff. It takes tremendous organization and a lot of late hours. This was a difficult case. This was a circumstantial case. This is a case that we tried 5 years, almost to the date, as when it happened. So I'm very gracious that the jury listened to our side of it, did their homework. We asked them to view some things, and I think they did view that. So I think this is a great verdict, not only for Dawson County. This is really about the family. This is about the victims and what they've been through. And just the opportunity for us to give them this small gift of justice makes it all worthwhile.
Olivia, you've been in this community for quite some time now, and I remember when those first reports of Susan Casey missing came in. Tell me about your process, because you've been around now almost since the beginning, interacting with the family and what that took.
You know, I can't say enough good things about the family. They've hung in there with law enforcement for 5 years. They've been very patient. They've been very supportive and understanding of the decisions that were made by law enforcement and the prosecutors, and I just think this is a wonderful day for them.
District Judge Richard Simonton ordered a pre-sentence investigation, and sentencing will be set at a later date. The Montana Farm Bureau says no to shorter tax reappraisal cycles. The Montana Farm Bureau continues to oppose legislation that calls for a shorter tax reappraisal cycle. SB 398 changes the reappraisal cycle for Class 3, that's agricultural land, Class 4 residential, and Class 10 forest land from 6 to 2 years. SB 398 is similar to SB 4. SB 4 would have changed the tax reappraisal cycle to 1 year, but was tabled in the Senate committee. Montana Farm Bureau policy is opposed to any tax reappraisal less than the current 6 years. The bill, sponsored by Senator Bruce Tuvet from Kalispell, has passed as an amendment out of the Taxation Committee and will be read on the House floor. MFBF lobbyist Nicole Rolfe said that it is going to be a tough battle, and, quote, "We will continue to try to remove Class 3 ag land from the bill as it needs to stay on the 6-year cycle. If Class 4 and 10 want a shorter tax appraisal cycle of 2 years, we're not standing in their way, but we want to see ag land removed from this bill," unquote. She added that they believe it's important to have a 6-year reappraisal cycle with gradual phased-in increases because farmers and ranchers need to plan ahead for increases in their property taxes. Rolfe points out that the current 6-year cycle is not even completed yet. Many women have trouble obtaining financial security even when they are employed full-time. In Montana, women generally earn less than 3/4 of what men earn. A workshop will be presented in Glendive next Monday, April 8th, and will look at how this discrepancy plays out in the actual economy. Getting Alice Out of Wonderland reveals the interconnected reasons between economic realities of working women. ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained and Yet Employed, a description of how many working women are in this part of the country. The evening workshop will show how the elements of ALICE interact and reinforce each other. For example, because they earn less money, women are less likely to have access to home mortgages and have saved less for retirement, and the expenses of health care and child care mean women are less likely to seek health care. The ALICE workshop will be presented by Corky Bush and Diane Ernberger, both past presidents of the Montana State American Association of University Women. Prior to retirement, Bush was the Affirmative Action Officer for MSU Bozeman, and Ernberger was a librarian at Bozeman High School. Both women serve on the boards of both AAUW Montana and the Montana Women's Lobby. The Glendive workshop is sponsored by the Glendive branch of AAUW. KYW. After the presentation, participants will discuss ways to break the Alice cycle. The evening will conclude with refreshments and a time of informal conversation and connection. The workshop will be held on April 8th from 7 to 9 p.m. in the basement room of the Glendive Public Library. The Alice workshop is open to the public and is free for all those attending. For more information about the workshop or AAUW, contact Twyla McPherson at 406-377-2677 or Andreen Haas at 406-377-4793. We'll be right back after.
And welcome to your daily dose of reality. An outdoorsman was escorted from a local park after assaulting himself with bear spray. In a statement, the victim said, "Man, the label looked different, shiny and red. I thought it was like a strong mint spray until I couldn't see anymore." Local bears declined comment, but officials say he also thinks those new smokeless tobacco products aren't harmful. Chew on this, genius. Smokeless isn't safe, no matter what it looks like.
Montana East Regional News with Emilie Boyles is produced by Marks Group Broadcasting. You can listen weekdays in Glendive, Forsyth, Miles City, and Sidney, Williston, and Dickinson, North Dakota. Find Montana East Regional News on television on KXGN CBS and KXGN NBC. You can also keep up with breaking news and great regional events. Find Emilie Boyles on Twitter and Facebook. I am with Congressman Steve Daines, who is touring through Montana and this week in eastern Montana to talk about energy and energy companies and what they're doing for our state and our country. So, Steve, what are you doing in Glendive first? And I know you're going to Sydney and you've been a few other places.
Well, we're going to put a lot of miles on the rig this week for sure, as we're traveling around the state. But one thing we're seeing back in Washington and hearing it back home here in Montana is the importance that energy development plays in both our state's future as well as our country's future. It relates directly to jobs, not just low-paying wages, but high-paying jobs, careers for Montanans. It's increased tax revenue. It's improving our national security situation so we're less dependent on the folks who don't like us overseas. I think we really have a chance in the next 10 years to become energy independent. That's a pretty exciting vision.
And speaking of energy independent, you have worked with one of the tribes in Montana because they have a vision of some real independence as well in regards to energy. Tell me about that.
Well, it's interesting. The chairman of the Crow tribe, Darren Old Coyote, he came and visited me in my Washington office here 6 weeks ago. In fact, Chairman Old Coyote's cousin walked to school with me in a kindergarten back in Bozeman a long time ago. And so it's interesting, what comes around goes around when you grow up in Montana. But, Chairman Old Coyote and the Crow tribe signed an exciting deal with Cloud Peak Energy, which is all about coal and extracting those resources there in the reservation. And, a vision for the Crow tribe to become more independent, both financially and from the resources they have on the reservation. So that's an exciting vision that we're seeing, and great to see that occurring right there on the Crow Reservation.
Now, just like that's happening for the Crow Nation, is there that potential for our states to need less federal dollars?
Well, I tell you, when we're dealing with a federal government that is nearly $17 trillion in debt, that's one of the great concerns I have for our country. I'm a fifth-generation Montanan. My great-great-grandma homesteaded up by Conrad, Montana. But growing up in Montana and being in the business for 28 years before I was elected to Congress, I recognize you can't keep spending more money than you're taking in. Something that is unsustainable comes to an end. And when we see what's going on where our federal government seems to want to keep spending more money recklessly than it takes in, we need to be very careful we don't become dependent on our federal government, because at some point what they're doing back there is going to end. We've got to find ways here to bring our federal government back into fiscal balance, and that's why it's important that Montana balances its budget every year. We're constitutionally required to do that. They're meeting in Helena right now. Guess what? They will produce a balanced budget. Washington, D.C., we're going to see 10 more years of unbalanced budgets if we go down the path that the United States Senate has headed down. We passed a plan in the House week before last that balances, does not raise taxes. The other plan raises taxes $1.5 trillion, $4 trillion of additional debt, and never balances. There are two competing visions back in Washington right now.
And your vision?
My vision is a balanced budget. I mean, that problem in Washington, in fact, our revenue to the federal government next year will be an all-time record high without raising taxes. In fact, our revenues as a percent of our gross domestic product is back to 40-year historical averages. What is the problem is our spending is still out of whack. And we've got to do what family businesses, family budgets have had to do, farm and ranch operations have had to do in Montana for years, and that is you got to find ways to make sure you don't spend more than you take in.
And if people have feedback or questions for Congressman Steve Daines,
it's essential that I hear from the folks across our state. They can write, email, phone, daines.house.gov.
we'll hear more from Congressman Steve Daines as he progresses through eastern Montana on his energy tour. If you have a hot news story or a news tip you'd like to share with us, you can email us at newsdesk@kxgn.com. For Montana East Regional News, this is Emilie Boyles.